ton of things have changed from when I was a K-12 administrator and definitely a high school administrator. I was very college centered, very college centered and college focused. And then we moved from college to adding career, right? So we became college and career focused. And now I just say, you know what? How about just being focused on tapping into the gifts that each child brings to the table?
Welcome to the Superintendent's Hangout, where we discuss topics in education, charter schools, life in general, and not necessarily in that order. I'm your host, Dr. Sharetta. Come on in and hang out. In this episode, I sat down with Dr. Nicole Wahab. Dr. Wahab is a lifelong educator, a serial entrepreneur, and reading from her website, quote, hardwired to create new and innovative opportunities. I define myself as a mother of successful adult children and a partner to an equally driven man, but I am also defined by a dogged determination to build. I have built a successful career as an educator and leader, founder of 2 charter high schools, and professor of organizational leadership. I have been the president of a global sports company and CEO of a technology integrator, and most recently, a marina owner, short-term rental entrepreneur, and hiring extraordinaire. Dr. Wahab and I cover a wide range of topics, from the challenges of her upbringing, overcoming family abuse, building her own family, her career, both in the private sector as well as in the public sector, how those two complement each other, what it means to bulletproof your life, and much more. I hope you enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with Dr. Nicole Wahab. Welcome, Nicole. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon remotely from Georgia.
Yeah.
I'm going to start with a different first question than I normally do. You're a sports fan, right?
Big time.
What's your walk-up song?
Oh, how about Tom Petty, Won't Back Down?
Okay. There's that question could go any different direction, right? Sometimes people are like, I forget the name, and then they start to sing it. So, but Don't Back Down's a good one. How does that play into your origin story, the path that took you from, your childhood to where you are today?
Well, you can stand me up at the gates of hell, but I won't back down. So that's really how it applies. I had a rough childhood. It was not the easiest. I had ebb and flows of various different things. My parents got divorced when I was young, which probably was a good thing, wasn't a bad thing. They kind of went their separate ways, and they needed to do that. And then we had kind of pure evil come into our lives. My stepfather was an abuser, and he abused my brother and I both, and that continued for years. And I think when you asked me, how that song plays out, it truly was the gates of hell in some ways. But I refused, for whatever reason, I have no idea what it is, innately just had some resilience, and I refused to back down. And I refused to back down in a variety of ways. I wouldn't let him steal my sunshine as much as possible. So when I went to school, if you ask people, oh, well, yeah, shit, that's that outgoing girl. She does a lot, and she's into sports, and she's academic, and she's this and she's that. And so, I learned really young to fake it till you make it. And so that really kind of started my path. And then I realized, well, at some point, you're going to grow up, and when you grow up, you're going to have to figure this out for yourself, and you're going to want to be successful. And so what does that look like? And I think from a very young age, I realized that there were people and pathways that I didn't want to join or be a part of, because they were not going to get me to my end goal. And at that time, I think my end goal was just get out and survive. And, although get out and survive also meant go to college, it just seemed like that was the logical thing to do. If I got good grades and I got to college, then I would get out of this house, essentially. And so that really kind of played out. Um, I was academic and I was a jock at the same time, but I was better academically than I was a jock. And so that's probably it's probably a good thing, because I think I learned pretty early on that that those academics and those soft skills were going to carry me far. And I also just, came from this place of determination. I think when everybody else was out playing or wanting to do things that normal high schoolers would be doing, it's not like I didn't partake in what normal high schoolers did. But I never made it my defining moment. I was so afraid that if I, did the wrong thing, or I got with the wrong crowd, or something that becomes my defining moment, and then I'm stuck forever. And so I just refuse to be stuck forever. And I think that's where somehow I tapped into this beginning of resilience. And it's carried me far, honestly.
So thank you for your candor about your childhood. What led from very difficult childhood to resilience to then school leadership? Because when I first met you, I knew you as Doc Wahab or Dr. Wahab, and we can talk about how many URLs you own with some combination of those. But I met you when you were running a charter school here in San Diego. What led you? Like, what's that path?
Yeah. So really, so that whole piece of college resilience was paramount. Believe it or not, like day one of my first day of college in San Diego, I got out of the heck out of Dodge the minute I graduated. So I graduated from high school, got in my car, and I drove to San Diego, and I never looked back. And literally, and I mean that like while people were still at grad night, right? I never even went. And I was ready to start my life. And so I started my life. I met my, who ends up becoming my husband of 23 years. We were married. But I met him day one. And when I met him day one, it was kind of incumbent on me to say, okay, well, wait a second. Am I going to play around and date and do all of these things that you should be doing in college, or you're going to get serious? And I decided that it was just, I had found the right person. It seemed right. And we got serious and got married young, had some kids. And it's during that process that I said, I'm never going to stop any of what I had going. And I never stopped schooling, while all of that was going on. So literally got married, had 2 kids and 3 degrees within 12 years. And so I did not stop. I had, and during that time I worked as a teacher. I worked in Rancho Santa Fe as a teacher. That was kind of my early starting years there. And then I worked in Valley Center. And so I had my fair share of elementary years of teaching, and then and I kind of just kept going up the ranks, if you will, in the teaching world. I enjoyed elementary, but I was like, well, you know what? I think I want to be an administrator, and if I really want to be an administrator, I better try out this thing called middle school. So I taught 6th grade and tried out middle school, and that was a whole learning lesson in itself. And then went on to high school. Actually, during that time, I also had the opportunity to meet multiple, just long time, colleagues and friends in my doctoral program, my master's program and my doctoral program, who were had their own goals too, and a lot of them were, they wanted to be administrators, and 2 of them were in Poway already, as kind of the beginning administrators, either assistant principals or principals, and then we're going to go on to probably bigger and better things. I had my eye on something a little different, and this charter movement thing was very interesting to me. And it just happened at the same time that I'm kind of finishing up my doctorate at the tender age of 29, that I'm right in the crux of this new movement. And it was kind of exciting. It was really exciting. It was actually really exciting. And I felt like it pushed me to continue my doctorate and finish that, because I wanted my shot. And it comes from, I remember I was always like the teacher in the back of the faculty lounge, like, and we had the blueprint. Remember those days? We had this like blueprint, right? And you're like, oh, we're going to follow the blueprint, and you have to do it this way. And this is your hours. And this is, from this time to this time, we're going to read. And from this time to this time, we're going to have recess. And everything was really scripted. And I realized that like our students were falling behind. Yeah. Like I saw it happening before my eyes. And I was just like, well, wait a second, kind of had my hand up in the back of the lounge. And I'm like, we're talking about this blueprint again, but how come we're not just doing what's right for Johnny? Like, I don't get it. Like, and I remember distinctly that one of my principals said to me, well, when you have your own school, you can write the rules. Wow. And I was like, wow. What does that mean? Like when you have your own school? So it was interesting because I think at the time, I think my brain only thought, well, that means that you're going to have some type of, private school. Right. And you're going to have to become some type of private school administrator. And I knew that didn't really fit the mold for me. I was a public school kid. I do feel like a lot of what shaped me was from educators that cared to continue to kind of like say, hey, you've got a lot going on at home, or you've got a lot going on in your head, but you know what, if you stay this path, this is going to change you. And so I wanted to be that educator. I was like, well, wait a second, how can I like reach the most amount of kids? And my classroom was awesome. And being a K-12 administrator was going to be awesome, all of those things. But wow, wouldn't it be really cool if, just kind of like what my principal had said to me, that I got to write the rules and I got to finally get off the blueprint. And so that's really where kind of we picked up and met. Is I kind of always carried this dream with me. I'd been to multiple functions, and I ended up at Coleman University at a function one night, and Dr. Coleman Furr was there, and he's like, hey, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm a principal at Mount Everest Academy. It's a K-12 in San Diego Unified. And he's like, oh, okay. So what do you really want to do? And I was like, well, that's kind of strange. Like, why would he ask me? Of course, I'm like at the pinnacle of my career. I'm a principal. Like, what more would I want to do? And I said, well, since you asked, I'm like, honestly, I'd like to start a charter school. And by the way, do you have $5 million? And he kind of chuckled and laughed, and I kind of chuckled and laughed. And the next thing I know, literally the next day, I get a call to my office that Dr. Furr was on the line, and he wanted to speak to me. And Dr. Furr said, hey, were you serious about that $5 million? And I was like, yeah, I'm serious about that $5 million. And he said, well, okay, well, why don't we work together and talk about this whole charter school thing? I don't know anything about it, but it seems like, I built universities from the ground up, and it seems like you're eager and excited to build some type of school system. What could we do? And I think, it was just really during that conversation right then and there, I said, well, you know what, I guess we could reverse engineer all of this, and we could start with homegrown tomatoes. Let's build a school that is centered around technology and has this opportunity to feed into your college if that's what you wanted, or if they want to go wherever. And so that's really kind of how it took place, was partly giving an opportunity for kids in San Diego to have a school of choice, because I felt like education was very draconian at that time. And I think as parents, we felt the same thing too, and just felt very pushed. And charter was an opportunity, and school of choice was an opportunity to to change that for a lot of kids.
I remember, I think it was in conversations that you and I had when I was interviewing successful school leaders for my dissertation, that you talked about the school bus and starting or having at least a portion of the school operating for a period of time on a school bus because of something having to do with permits in a building. Can you tell our listeners kind of about that and what that did for your organization?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We got the charter approved at the district level and all those good things, but the one of the biggest challenges at that time was facility. How do you really get a school facility? It was, I mean, it still is a challenge. I mean, honestly, if you talk to charter leaders, they'll talk to you about facility. Facility is always a problem. We had ideas about putting it at the university campus or doing different things. And so finally we ended up renting a building. We thought everything was going to go perfectly fine. And we would get the kids in class on time after marketing all summer and the whole 9 yards. And as it turned out, we ended up not getting our certificate of occupancy. And so not getting our certificate of occupancy literally put kids on a school bus to go do tours of other charter schools for the first kind of 2 weeks of school, just to be able to start school. And it's interesting because when you talk to those graduates that had that opportunity for those first 2 weeks of literally just being on a school bus and going to different charter schools to have kind of an introduction to what the charter school world looked like around the county, they would say that was kind of a unique. It was unique schooling, but it was also a unique opportunity to see what type of schools are out there. And it probably brought everybody a lot closer together. We started in very humble beginnings. Our first building was an old blood bank in Kearney Mesa, and it was small, it was tiny. We started we started there for the first 2 years, and we knew that as we grew that we would really want to have a permanent facility. And it was Dr. Furr's, mission and goal to give us a permanent facility. And so we did end up eventually by year 3, building from the ground up, not only just building out the charter school as a system and an institution, but we physically built a building as well. So it was an interesting time for all of us to learn and grow and to see just exactly what school of choice is this. It's an opportunity to do things differently and to learn differently. And so I guess in some ways, just even our struggles of, finding a building and getting kids in seats and all of those things, and just always just kind of wiggling our way through all of the, obstacles just made us that much stronger. And it was really exciting that first graduating class to see just how strong those kids were.
Yeah, it's one of those things that in the moment might not have seemed like a positive, but 10, 15, 20 years on, people think back on that as a galvanizing point in the organization's history. What was his name? Dr. Furr?
Yeah.
What did he have to gain, do you think?
So it's interesting. Dr. Coleman Furr was all about legacy. He had started the first, it started even as a punch cards back in, the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s. Typing school is what it really was. It started out as a typing school, and then it became a vocational school, and then it became a true university over time. And I think what he was looking at is he had plenty of money. His name was well known in San Diego. Everybody knew Coleman University. It was, he had a ton of commercials. He had a ton of, reach within the community. And I think this was just another opportunity for him to continue his legacy. He cared deeply about education. That is 100% part of his legacy, is that he cared about education, and he cared about educating those that weren't necessarily just book savvy. Like he was excited about those that wanted to learn through technology or learn new technology or learn a vocation. And so I think he saw that Coleman Tech was really like our opportunity to grow it at a, grow kids at a potential younger in age, to realize that it's okay to look at education differently and look at careers differently.
So you did a significant stretch of time at Coleman, and everything in life, the only constant is change. So I think, I'm not sure if Coleman University is still around. The charter doesn't bear that name anymore. It's kind of on to its next iteration. But you then moved on to the private sector, if I'm not mistaken. Can you kind of describe some of that transition? And I think in researching a bit about your resume, it kind of looks like you, even while you were leading the school, you did other private sector-y consulting and writing and stuff. So talk about kind of that transition and how that was for you.
So I think there was, I'm a lifelong learner, right? So that's innate. I want to learn. I want to see different things. And I just always felt like that the charter school really was, a way to scratch my entrepreneurial itch, right? At the end of the day, it's still an entrepreneurial venture. And I knew I really loved that opportunity to take something from nothing and grow it into really, something amazing, a place where we graduate kids and they go on to college and career. And that was really exciting. And so while I was doing that, I had an opportunity to, like most educators and administrators, I taught at Chapman University, I taught at National University, I taught at Alliant International University as well. So I had a lot of opportunity to go out and teach teachers. And as exciting as it is to teach teachers or teach administrators, I kept kind of just going full circle back to my favorite part of my EDD program was organizational leadership. I loved the idea of taking a company and building out what that looks like, and how do you build the systems in which a company needs to function, and all of the ins and outs and the intricacies of that. And so I kind of knew that was a soft skill of my program, if you will. But then, of course, as you know, school leadership from a charter standpoint, you really are a CEO. You are operating a true corporation. Matter of fact, it's a legal corporation in California, right? So, it is a true corporation. And so, there were various times that just made sense to me that I would continue to dabble in, just kind of my own pursuits of consulting and or ways to become a thought leader besides education, but with kind of that bend of education. And so one of the things I did is I kind of created the Stellar Scholar Institute, and through that I ended up becoming I had an article for Spotlight Sports Magazine that was just basically behind the teacher's desk and behind the principal's desk, and just kind of the pathway and navigation of how do you take kids and their concepts, not only just on of wanting to become successful in college and career, but how do you also do that for yourself as you kind of get pigeonholed into I'm an educator, or I run a charter school, or whatever that little venture is, and it's huge. I still didn't want to get completely pigeonholed in there. I wanted to have an opportunity to still kind of play in the corporate world, and that was a way that I could do that. And so once I left Coleman Tech, I literally went to my mirror and I started manifesting what my next plan was. And I wrote on my mirror.
Say that again. You went to your mirror?
Went to my mirror. Yeah. to like my actual mirror, my bathroom mirror, and I took out a whiteboard marker and I
Wow.
wrote on my mirror kind of what my next goal was. And I had you know how we have on LinkedIn, we get these little you know, ads, if you will, that say, you know, oh, we think this position would be really good for you.
Right.
You should try
Well,
applying for it, right?
yeah.
And so one of the ones I got was applying for the president of football.com. And I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. Like, I love sports. I love football. You know, I'm a CEO. Like, can I make this happen? So that day I applied. And after I applied, I went to my mirror and I wrote on my mirror with a, you know, with whiteboard marker, you're looking at the next president of football.com. Well, what was interesting is I had put the next president of football.com. And I didn't realize that they'd never had a president of football.com. So it was kind of exciting. I put that on there. Well, 2 months went by. I heard nothing. It was crickets, quiet, nothing, zero. I was like, wow, well, I guess that dream's going away. And I kind of walked by my mirror and I was about to like, I'm a little OCD anyways about that kind of stuff. And I was about to clean it off. And as I was walking by, I said, no, wait a second. You know, I applied for a job. I'm a professional. They're a professional company. If they really didn't want me and they never were going to give me a chance, I would get a rejection letter. That's just the way it would be. And I don't have a rejection letter yet. So I kind of like started saying to myself, so if there's not a rejection, then it's kind of like, well, then you're saying there's a chance. So I kept living with the dream that, yeah, maybe there's this chance. And lo and behold, my phone rang and it was football.com and they wanted to interview me and I was super excited and it was unbelievable. Well, they had 250 applicants. Of those 250 applicants, they had MBAs that have MBAs in sports management. They had everything that made sense for that job. And I was like, well, I don't know, but I'm going to continue to just kind of dream this. I think that I would be awesome in this position. And the more that I got with the team and went into the second round interviews, third round interviews, those type of things, I realized that there was a bigger mission here. And that mission was to take football.com and use it as an actual platform to gain exposure for athletes to go to college. And I was like, wow, well, there's my in. Like, if anybody knows how to get people to college, that's me. And so I really did kind of play up, obviously, that. And long story short, I got the position. I couldn't believe it. Even my friend, Dr. Lopez, Dan Lopez, he's so funny. We got our doctorate together, and he was a administrator in Poway for many years, and then went on with his brother to create No Excuses University. But he was one of my references. And when the owner of football.com called to get a reference from him, he said, I'm just going to tell you this right now. I don't know how this girl thinks that she's going to do this, but if there's anybody on the planet that can do this, is going to be her. So all I can say is she does love sports. She does know how to build schools. She knows how to build programs, and she's dreaming this dream. And all I can say is I hope it works out for her. And it did. So it was pretty exciting. And I think that was when I said, okay, if there's a yes in the corporate world for that, then there's probably yeses in the corporate world for other things. And I can be more than just a school entrepreneur.
What is football.com other than a super cool web address?
Yeah. So at the time, so it is a super
and expensive,
cool,
right?
Yeah, it's a super cool, expensive toy. Football.com was definitely at the time, it was kind of a media source, and the goal was kind of like, what will we do with this? And so I was actually hired as the president of football.com to go figure out and travel the world and figure out, well, what could we do with this URL? The URL itself, is probably one of the, one of the most sought after single word URL on the planet, right? And everybody and their brother can use it. So they had already built, before I even got there, there was an entire development team that had already built some business around it. But their idea was that this would be a large platform worldwide, and we had managed editions worldwide. So when you went to football.com in Ireland, it looked the way it needed to look in Ireland. If you went in Singapore, it looked the way it needed to look in Singapore. It was unbelievable. So a ton of money went into this platform. And so this enterprise level platform, you literally could upload videos of yourself. So like if you were a kid in Ghana and you just never got this chance to show off your footy skills, and you have amazing, soccer skills, this was your shot, right? You could just go to an internet cafe and you could get on football.com and you could upload a video, and you could essentially reach somebody in the US or reach one of these other international, football clubs and showcase who you are. So it was really cool. It was an opportunity for everybody to upload a video and be seen. There was a lot of plans around that. And then in addition to that, it was soccer management. So at that time, big club soccer around even just Southern California, for example, big deal then and big deal today. And it was just kind of a way to kind of have everybody on the club team be on the same page, at the very beginning of these social networks. And so that's what was built. And then we just kind of kept playing with the idea of what else could it be used for. And so there's still a big question mark out there. I think at some point, it's used as media site. It can be used probably as gambling becomes legal in all of these states. It would be great for that. There's a lot of use for it. It's just one of those fun companies that is going to continue to morph over time, because it's a single word URL that everybody knows and recognizes.
I bet the NFL would pay an unlimited amount of money for that URL.
You would think that, but you have to look at the big picture, right? So the interesting thing is the NFL already has NFL. I mean, and that's what we recognize them as. So there is like a window. So just know this: if you ever buy a URL, there is a window of time that you have to put some business around it. Because if you don't, somebody will go past that and circumvent it, and they say, oh, well, you know what, they already have football.com, but that's okay, we're the NFL, we'll just be NFL.com, and we'll just totally circumvent this whole football thing because we can't own it anyways. So so just know that whatever URL you take, if you're serious about it, put some business around it.
I was thinking back on that URL. I'm fascinated by people who buy URLs, and either through strategy or blind luck, it's usually probably the latter. They end up with a super cool URL and they just pay to renew it every 3 years, and one day it's worth a lot of money. And I was thinking back to when, let's say this was probably the late 90s, I think, where I remember big companies were like, well, is it really worth developing a website or not? And like Nike and, and some of them just were like, it's not worth it. Our business is bricks and mortar or whatever. And
right.
So now 25 years ago, and now, you look and you go, oh my God, now everything is I think there must almost be bots that sit there trying to create potential URLs, because just about anything under the sun is unavailable. Anything with AI, now everything has AI. So you'd be football.ai or whatever. So yeah, it's interesting.
So what's interesting about URLs is that back in the day, so early 90s, when all of this is coming of age, it was expensive to keep your URL. So there wasn't a GoDaddy, warehouse of being able to just kind of, spend, you get your URL on a website for $11.99, for the year. No, nothing like that exists. And so you literally did have to put business behind it from the very beginning. You had to either start an LLC or a corporation or whatever, and you had to keep that going. And in California, that's an expensive venture right there. So imagine that, to be able to even keep something that you've had since 1994, 96, 97, whatever it is, that is already what was already a very expensive gamble. Sure. And it's real estate. At the end of the day, your URLs are real estate. And so, yes, like you said, and there are bots that, collect them, but at the same time, there's people like me. I think I'm right at 21 URLs that I own. And of the 21, I'm trying to probably have like 6 or 7 that have true business behind them.
Right. The rest are just kind of dormant out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no one's ever going to buy anything related to my name because it's so unusual. So I think David Sharetta will be available forever. Unless one of my tens and tens of listeners decides to go out and put down good money to buy davidsharetta.com, which would be a creepy thing for them to do. So in preparation for this, I was kind of reading about your philosophy, not only in business, but in life. And I ran across this phrase of making yourself and others bulletproof. And it strikes me as instructive and significant that you had such a challenging childhood, and you've in many ways in your life been able to overcome that and achieve significant things and have a positive outlook on life. Can you talk about what it means to bulletproof your life and how you use that with others?
Yeah, I think the bulletproof concept is, it's strong, right? It's different than resilience, because resiliency is like something that we still can't figure out. Like, is it nature? Is it nurture? Who has it? Why do you have it? Sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't have it. There's this kind of ebb and flow of resilience. Being bulletproof means that it kind of is like once you put on the vest, nothing can penetrate you. And everybody and their brother is going to take a shot at you, right? That's just the way life is. And life itself is going to take shots at you. And I think that's just something that I've had to learn is like, you know what, I'm not going to let anybody take a shot at me. I'll start from a very beginning of becoming bulletproof. Is I was and I'll even use her name, Keely Lambert. I don't even know if she still exists, but back in 4th grade, we used to do those little tally mark things, right? And girls are so relentless in 4th grade. They're like the worst, right? They're terrible. And she had this like little tally list, and she came up running up to me and she said, "These are the number of people that like you, and these are the number of people that don't like you." Right. And on that list, right, it was like, it says you, meaning just me. And right. It was a 1, and then everybody else. And it was like 7,000 tally marks. Right. And I was like, damn, that's mean.
That's bullying pre-social media.
Right. That's bullying for social. Yeah. So bullying's been going on a long time. Yes. Right. And I don't know that I don't even know. I don't think we ever really talked about that. Right. As Gen Xers, we don't really know what bullying is. We had no idea. We just got beat up by certain people and we moved on. But I remember it was then I was like, well, that's not very nice. And I just had to find a way to put on my jacket and be bulletproof and like not let that bother me. And I remember going into the girls' bathroom crying for a little bit about that, and then coming back out. And then the second I came back out, like 2 of my little friends that, remember, everybody doesn't like me, right? Everybody. And so 2 of my little friends came up to me and they were like, "Oh, let's go play." And I was like, oh yeah, you got to be bulletproof against this person, not the whole world, right? And so I think from a very young age, I realized that you're going to have to do that. I had to protect myself in my own family. I had to protect myself, as I grew up. I had to protect myself anytime somebody got jealous of something that I did or didn't do. The world is cruel. The world is a cruel place, and you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea. You're just not. And I think even in the charter world, I had to be bulletproof, right? Like there were people taking shots at me when I'm trying to build a school that literally is going to cater to, socially, economically disadvantaged, and students that have, disabilities, and everything's all inclusive. And so nobody should be taking a shot at that. Nobody should. They should just be like, wow, that's so freaking cool. That's awesome. No, that's just not life, right? And so I have had this stiff upper lip, fake it till you make it, like I said from the very beginning of this podcast. And part of that being bulletproof, I thought, well, you know what, I've taken that concept in my life, I've applied it to business, and I think this is now the time to kind of start talking more about how do you do that as you're going into middle age and beyond, right? And so as we're heading into retirement years and different genres of our life, we're going to have to become bulletproof again. And so I actually am going to be spending some time. Probably I've already kind of skeletoned, if you will, a backbone of a book for this, and we'll kind of see how it evolves. But the premise is that you can build this type of resiliency that equals success. And that could be for business or your personal life. And the way to do that is to be able to let those shots bounce off of you.
So at a certain point, if I'm not mistaken, NFL.com was not NFL.com. See, I'm already projecting. Football.com was located in California. And then at a certain point, you left the state and you ended up in the South. I'm not sure if Kentucky is deep South or South Light. I think Georgia. Anyway, you tell me what brought you there, and what was that like as a transition in your life, personally, professionally, geographically?
Yeah, so interesting, all in one kind of fell swoop. So football.com was sunsetting, and at the same time I had another offer from this group of IBMers that I'd met. Networking's everything, right? And so you continue to network, and so I ended up building a system integration company with them. And as I did that, my kids were going off to college. I was going to be going through a divorce. The world was changing in just every aspect of everything. And during that time, I think I just started to lose my identity. I had already lost my identity as an educator, and I wasn't really sure what that meant. And as a school leader, and then I was like, okay, well, now I'm a corporate businesswoman. And now I have a new identity, and new people taking shots at me and new problems. And so, and then at the same time, I'm also trying to personally, grow past the title of mom and wife. That's huge. I mean, when you start losing these titles, these large titles that define you, you realize that that things, life goes on and things change, but you also need to change. And so COVID actually is what forced me out of Southern California. So I was going back and forth. I had already bought a lake house in Kentucky, and it was really just because I wanted a spot of respite, right? I just was like, well, how nice would it be to just be able to be a lake house fishing, and enjoying life. And I could already work from home. So, with my system integration company. So I was like, this is just perfect. And I could just go back and forth to Dana Point when I need to, that sort of thing. And I did, up until COVID. And now we're back into redefine, and everybody has to redefine themselves again. Can you afford two places? No. Like, that's a reality. No, you can't. Okay, so something's got to give. Well, I guess I'm moving to Kentucky. So it was exciting. It was the right choice. My kids were off and doing their thing in Wyoming. So it wasn't like I had, there was no ties left to Southern California. And so it was just the right timing. Went off to Kentucky and continued to build different entrepreneurial, pursuits there. And I think that's where I kept getting phone calls from everybody after COVID. All of Gen X, right? If you were already seated in a position and you're like, you're an educator and you've got a pension, or you've got something already done and you weren't going anywhere, because your position wasn't going anywhere, then most likely you were going to stay where you're at. But during COVID, if you were a Gen Xer who decided at like some point to exit that life, like I did, and go to a corporate world, there's no stability anymore, right? That stability is gone. And so once that stability was gone, I realized, well, I'm going to have to reinvent myself. I'm going to have to figure out what I want to do next. I ended up buying a marina with my brother and some investors, which was a lot of fun because that's kind of what you do in the lake life. And it was during that time that I just kept getting phone calls from just, friends, networking, people that are, people that have seen my story and said, wait, how do you go from like educator to the corporate world to like, you could just go do whatever you want. And you don't have to work. You're not stressing about it. Like, how come you're not stressing about like retirement or stressing about your paycheck or all those things? I do stress about those things, but it's a trade-off. And the trade-off was that I was going to have some freedom to do what I wanted to do and pursue different things. And so when I got a call from a friend that said, I don't get it. I don't know what to do. I lost my job, corporate world, right? Lost my job. I don't think we're coming back. When we do come back, I don't think my position's going to be there anymore. And all I know and have ever done is X, right? And so it was just call after call, that same story. Attorneys were going through the same thing, like, especially if they were beginning attorneys. Like, I think a lot of us, have tried various careers. We're not the baby boomers that stuck with the same program all the way through. And so we've tried different careers, or we've tried different things. And as we know, corporate America lays off everybody at some point, and when they get laid off, what do you do next? And so that this idea of reinventing yourself and being able to try new things and do it kind of fearlessly is also part of being bulletproof.
Now that you have this perspective of the private sector and the public sector, what's one thing that is easier to do or to accomplish in private business, and what's one thing that's more complicated? I've worked my whole life in public education in one way or another, and you fall into, I've done private work, but for the most part, this has been my job for my career for 30 years. And you fall into kind of a groupthink type of mentality, right? About concepts of security, whether they're real or imagined, that's a different thing, right? Concepts of people being able to lay people off really easily or not. And I can say that even in the charter world, where there isn't union protection typically, I think the nature of, for example, education in the public sector is that typically people don't want to lay people off. People don't want to take a metric and say, I'm sorry, after this many attempts, you're not achieving. So, find somewhere else to work. But what's one thing in your experience in the private arena that was easier or better, maybe? And then what's one thing that was more difficult?
I in the private sector, what's easier is that everybody's already used to the corporate structure. And so if you're working in corporate America, you already understand those nuances. You understand that your boss may bring you in and say, hey, everybody, if you notice, sales are down. And when sales are down, that means that we're not, bringing in enough revenue. And if we're not bringing in enough revenue, we're not able to hire new people. And guess what? You're a recruiter, and what you do is hire people. So since we're not hiring anybody, your job's going to be eliminated.
Yep.
It's just kind of A plus B equals C. Where in the education world, it always felt like, and just like you said, there weren't those protections. There's not those union protections. There's not tenure. There wasn't those things that, that we, you and I, got to experience when we were in regular public education from the beginning. But what's interesting is, I think, even though you get your budget and you go, hey, you know what, some things might need to change. I think there was always like this hope that, oh, well, the state might do better, or, oh, there might be some new grant, or, oh, there might be this. Where in the corporate world, there's very little hope. It's not a wing and a prayer situation.
And the metrics are very clear.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, especially in a private corporation that's, with got investors, whether you've gone, you're listed or not, but, the people who have the most skin in the game are going to have the most influence on decisions. That's the metric. You don't sell enough widgets, this is what it's going to be.
Yeah.
I think in nonprofit, public spheres, and certainly in school districts, the metrics just aren't that clear at all, right? And so you get in this situation where people go, oh, well, okay, yeah, revenue's down. It's down for all these other reasons, somewhat external to us, but we're having a hard time deciding if this person, this initiative, this program, this piece of software is worth it or not compared to the other one, and how do we judge that?
Right.
And I someday someone's going to do a research study, but you always hear these stories that in a traditional school district, it takes 3 years and $150,000 in legal costs to terminate a teacher after they've been tenured, for example. And then, people in a charter school world say, oh, we like not having those structures so we can move more quickly. The reality is, I'm not sure how much more quickly people move, and because there's this. First of all, most of us went through traditional public school experiences to get to where we are.
Mm-hmm.
And so our teachers and our staff, everybody kind of had that preparation. And so to get into this like performance-based, metric-based world, it's hard.
Yeah.
Humans don't like to violate the sanctity of the herd, the hunter-gatherer clan, and when you're asking someone to be eliminated from that circle, even if you help them land softly, there's, I think, something in the back of our heads. It's like, that could be me, or, I don't want them to do that to my best friend or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, I mean, it's funny because you always hear this. I love it when people go, well, it's easy to let somebody go. It's an at-will world. We're at will. We're at-will employees. Well, we know that that's just not true. Like at the end of the day, like, did you document things? Or did you put them on an improvement plan? Did you follow anything? You can say at will all you want, but if they have enough money and clout or documentation or whatever, if the stars align for them, they can legally pursue you, right? And so I think there's there's more fear in the education world of that for whatever reason. I have no idea, even at the district level, right? Like it's there, you see it. It's like, well, no, we don't want to do that's kind of crazy. Let's just go put them in the rubber room instead and let them, bounce balls until they retire, because we don't want to deal with that craziness. Where in the corporate world, it is so binary, right? It's just like it's like here's the not only here's the metrics, but the bank account doesn't have the numbers, so therefore it is what it is, and your position's gone, your team's been eliminated, this widget stopped, this whatever it is, we're restructuring, we're bankrupting, all of these things, and it's just business as usual. And I think that is definitely something different about the corporate world. It makes it, I mean, I've always, I've been accused multiple times, even as a charter leader, right, that you act sterile when you make decisions. Well, you have to. At the end of the day, we're not here to make decisions based on emotion or anything other than the facts and the metrics. But you also, once you do make that decision, you do have to be a little bit sterile in your approach because of how litigious people are. And you don't want to say the wrong thing, and you don't want, and what is a soft landing? It sucks. It sucks anytime somebody gets laid off or is told their position's eliminated, and then they have to go home and figure out how to make life happen.
Well, on my drive in this morning, I was listening to a podcast interview with the founder of Netflix, Reed Hastings, and he's tangentially he's a big charter school supporter as well, but he has this slide deck that's now become famous about the culture at Netflix. Supposed to be an internal document, but he was describing about how the first time he shared it with someone, they realized after the fact that person was going to put it online, and then he thought that was a negative, but then he realized it was a positive because now people read it before they even apply to Netflix.
Right.
But one of the central tenets of their corporation was the reward for adequate performance is a generous severance package at Netflix. That's their philosophy. And he's like, this is who we are. And, we're not trying to ruin someone's career if they perform adequately, we're going to help them move somewhere else, and we'll give them, half a year or whatever of compensation, and they're going to go do their thing. We want exceptional people in our organization. And that was like, wow, I started to break into a cold sweat as I was driving, because I thought, wow, if I put something like that on some of our foundational documents at Einstein Academies, I can anticipate all kinds of consequences of that.
Right.
So,
right. And I think it's interesting that they say that, right? But at the end of the day, is it, how much of it's true? Like what, and who, and how subjective is it? Because it also has to do with, at the corporate level, right? Their shareholders are making all the decisions. So, so he could be inadequate. He could be inadequate the next day. And, I think the only inevitable thing, and it's really interesting, the only inevitable thing about a CEO is not only that you said change, but it's not just change. The only inevitable thing is you will be removed at some point.
Yeah.
Because life has to go on.
You're either gonna, well, it's the same in school leadership.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's that same thing.
Yeah, at any executive level, right? It's either you're going to get removed by father time, anticipated or not. You're going to move horizontally. You're going to move vertically, or you're going to move vertically the other way, because you get fired, or and I think, and I'm sure you had experience working with boards, for example, corporate boards, or even just a group of founders, powerful people who have a say and a stake. And
Right.
And I think that it's probably not too dissimilar from working in a, you know, in a public setting with a board. Um, Perhaps with the difference that sometimes when you're working in a school board in a district with elected officials, you're dealing with people who are there for a very short amount of time.
Right.
There's a lot of turnover and churn. Um, but you know, I think these are really important elements to reflect on as we move through our life. I wanted to ask you, you've been very generous with your time, and so I don't want to drag you farther outside of your day than we've already done. But I have a couple questions about what your life is like now. So you list on one of your websites, one of the 21 URLs that you own, that you have a creative side, that you are a chicken enthusiast. I'm assuming that means raising and harvesting eggs, not necessarily Kentucky Fried. Uh, what does a typical day look like for you, and how does this creative side complement your other pursuits?
Yeah, it's interesting. I like to be grounded. That's just something that means a lot to me. I think part of that being grounded includes discipline. And things that are disciplined usually have some type of routine, right? So that's the reality. And so when you're raising chickens, they have a routine. You got to get, they have a very specific way that you care for them, and you want to make sure they lay eggs, and you want to, and if they're going to lay eggs, they're going to lay them because you're taking care of them and you're creating stability for them. And so that's really, I think, where that came from. I enjoy gardening. I have always had a green thumb. I love working with the land. I love fishing. I'm kind of one of those, I mean, I hate to use the term because I don't even know what it means anymore, but growing up, I was just always the tomboy, right? Like I have 5 uncles and on one side, and it was one of those things like, first thing in the morning, everybody's going fishing. I'm like the only girl, and yeah, you just become the boy and you just go do what the boys do. And so I really kind of picked up a lot of those kind of fun outdoors habits, and they make me feel good, and they make me feel kind of grounded in what life is. And I think, especially, I mean, if you're going to raise, it's interesting. It's like you raise your little chicks, which were my kids before, and now it's like, okay, now you can have a new set of kids, because those ones are already grown. Well, the same thing happens with the chickens, right? There's a life cycle, and when it ends, it ends. Same thing with when I'm a dog lover too. The same, it's like it's the saddest thing, that dogs only last on this planet, 13 to 15 years if you're lucky. It's there's just this cycle of life, and I enjoy that. And I think that type of nurturing makes me feel good.
What advice would you give to K-12 educators, K-16 educators, to better prepare students for the type of life and work you've had? You've been flexible and adaptable and courageous and resilient, or bulletproof, depending on how you define that. How can schools inculcate some of those qualities in students?
Well, first of all, I mean, we school of choice is important, right? This is not, there's nothing more critical than that. Every parent should be able to have a choice in how they want to educate their kids. I'm, if you want to homeschool them and you want to raise them on your land and that's what you want to do, go do that. I mean, you can do whatever you want that makes you feel like you're able to holistically grow a child. I do think a ton of things have changed from when I was a K-12 administrator, and definitely a high school administrator. I was very college centered very, very college centered and college focused. And then we moved from college to adding career, right? So we became college and career focused. And now I just say, you know what? How about just being focused on tapping into the gifts that each child brings to the table, and then being able to help them to harness that and foster it and grow it to their full potential, whatever that is. I mean, there are amazing kids out there right now. I mean, I have one that did my entire, I mean, anything and everything that I wanted woodworking wise in my house in Kentucky, he built for me. A custom bar, an all wood ping pong table, a custom, Kentucky bourbon wall, you name it. Like, he could do anything. And he started that when I met him. He was 17 years old. He was just about to graduate from high school. And I asked him, I said, so what are you going to do? And naturally, because he had this and he had built his own log cabin on his property, so he could just kind of have his own place away, as a kid would do, right? Type thing. And so he built his own little thing. And so naturally I just figured he was going to say woodworking, right? It just kind of makes sense. Or he was going to go to college. He's super smart. And I was like, well, so it's either college or woodworking. And he said, no, I'm actually, 2 weeks from now, I'm going to welding school. I was like, wow, that's amazing. And he did. He went to welding school, came straight out at age 18, making $80,000 a year. And the sky has been the limit ever since. And he's, that's what he loves. And so somewhere we have lost the ability to listen to our kids personally and to our kids that we are entrusted with, to help them to formulate those dreams. And I think there's not one size fits all approach. There's not a one size fits all school, as we know, but there's definitely not a one size fits all philosophy either. And the idea of college and career and what that means, and is it a STEM world anymore? I don't know. I don't think it is. I mean, we have to evolve. We have to change. If we're concerned that AI is going to take over jobs, the jobs that they should be concerned with, I think originally everybody was like, oh, it's going to be the medial jobs that, those low paying jobs that AI will take over. Absolutely not. It's going to be the high thinking jobs that that AI is going to take over. So if that's the case, does it make sense to turn out a whole bunch of systems, integration engineers right now? I don't know. So I think we're going to have to continue to evolve as the world evolves, and our concept of education is definitely in for, I think, a shock. It already was. I think we were already at the beginning of it as we were all starting charter schools, right? And the forefront of that. And we thought, wow, this is so innovative and so different and so new. But oh my gosh, we are in for a new surprise, I think, as we continue to think that there's some, blueprint to this education process and standardized education. I don't know what that is, because I don't know that it's going to exist that much longer.
It's interesting when you describe the young man who did so much work in your house and him becoming a welder, and hopefully he went to a school that fostered that and supported those types of activities, but very often our students don't.
Right.
And so I just was speaking with a nationally recognized expert on chronic absenteeism, which, as you know, pre and post COVID was night and day, and now isn't snapping back to pre-COVID levels the way that maybe we thought it would. And it begs the question of connection and understanding and irrelevancy of what's going on campuses, and do kids really see a through thread from what they're doing today to where they're going to be in the future, and marketable skills and things that they're interested in. And this expert said to me, actually, the programs that have CTE, the career tech stuff, the welding, probably carpentry, certain coding, although AI is going to kind of change that, but you're still going to need a human to know what questions to ask AI. Those are things that actually have been shown. Schools that have those programs have higher attendance and lower levels of chronic absenteeism than kind of more traditional academic, more purely academic schools. So I appreciate your answer, because I think as we go through life, we kind of, our idea, and especially as we have our own children and we see they pursue one thing, and then sometimes they wake up and they go, I'm chasing the wrong thing. I really want to do this. And you kind of have to love them and say, hey, okay, I'll support that if it makes you happy. It took me a long time in my life to get to the point where I realized that it was important to be happy, because as a type A person, I just always felt like you put your head down and you just kept rolling the rock up the hill.
Yeah.
That was it. You just rolled it up the hill. And when it came down in the night, you rolled it up the hill again. And who was that? Sisyphus, or and it's like, okay, but it would be great if you enjoyed it while you were doing it,
Right.
If you could have a smile on your face, and maybe once in a while you could roll the rock down a hill.
Right.
Great. I just have two more questions for you. You've been very generous with your time. What would your present self, whatever age you are, I'm not going to ask you, what would your present self tell your 20-year-old self about what lies ahead, the trials and the tribulations?
Yeah, you know what's interesting is I did a lot of living between 20 and 29. Probably most of my living was during those years. I had my first kid by 22. I was married at age 20. So I had like this like very quick adulting happening in my 20s that maybe like even my kid, and so my son, who's now 20, he's going to be 25. Yeah, I mean, I'm like, does he get to adult? Is he adulting the way that I adulted? No, he's not. He got to really enjoy his 4 years of college, and then he got into career, and he's doing his thing, and he's like slow, what I would call slow rolling his 20s, right? So he's really getting to do that. So if there was anything that I could tell myself then, is that you are required to enjoy the journey. Stop looking at the destination, enjoy that journey, because it went by so darn fast. And I was so busy and I was doing so much in my 20s that when I got to 30, it was like I was supposed to be doing like the beginning of adulting, but I had already been adulting for so long that I was already exhausted. So I'm kind of, it's funny because now that I play this game with my friends all the time. So there was two sets of philosophy, right? You either have your kids, you get married and have kids young, and you're poor and you have to like figure it all out, and you have to like, get your degrees, and you have to do everything all at the same time that you're raising kids. Or you go to college or career or whatever you're going to do, and enjoy your 20s and have fun and get married when you feel like it and have kids when you want to, and then now you're heading towards 50 and you still have kids in the house. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm not sure which way is the right way to do it, but it is reversed. So my 20-year-old self, I worked too hard in my 20s, but I'm glad that I checked those boxes then, because now I have a different level of freedom. And it's probably the same freedom that I would have had in my 20s.
Yeah, my dad always said, hard now, easy later.
Yeah.
Easy now, hard later.
Yeah.
And so there's wisdom going both ways in that.
It would have been nice to have some money, right? like have money and then have kids. Like that probably would have been a good, way to do it. But why do it that way? Struggle and then figure it out and make it happen. No, I just think I think it's I don't know. Six of one, half dozen of another.
And and like as you said with Coleman Tech Charter, like struggle defines us. And it sounds like your struggles as a child and as a teen helped not just define you because you've overcome them, but help make you bulletproof, right? As you move through your life. And so, we sometimes wish we had a magic wand to erase all those pieces. But as when you and I met in the interview for my dissertation, and I asked the same question about obstacles that other leaders had faced, and they were, a range of obstacles from similar to the ones you faced, to tragic, like things that happen in their school community, to human resource related disasters. And they describe it, and you could see them going through. And then at the end, I always ask the same question: if you could go back in time, would you erase that? And not a single one. I think I had 30 or 40 interviews. Not a single principal said, "Oh yeah, you know what? I could do without that." Even the gnarliest stuff, because it helped define the course of the organization and their own leadership.
Right. Well, it's interesting that you say about erasing it, because the one thing that I did learn about myself is that because I lived it, I was able to erase it for my kids. And that is huge. And I think that is something that all of us as educators, we got to take that to heart, because part of those little minds that come into our room each day, it's our job to erase the craziness that's their real life, and give them an opportunity to feel hope and feel like there's something better out there. And I think that is, I get emotional thinking about it, because I always gravitated towards the kids that I could see needed that same bit of advice that I needed when I was a little kid, which is, you know what, it's going to get better. But it's not going to get better without you making it better, and making better decisions, and making better plans, and making better friends, and whatever that is, right? And so you have to take that to heart. And that is part of reinventing yourself, and that is part of being bulletproof. If you think you're going to be bulletproof and you don't have to be disciplined, you're wrong.
No shortcuts.
No shortcuts.
I'm going to ask you one last question.
Okay.
It may be somewhat connected to it'll probably be connected to a lot of the threads that we started to pull today. You have the opportunity to design a billboards for the side of the freeway. I'm not sure there are freeways where you live. So Country Road, John Denver, Take Me Home, Country Road. Right. I think you said you live half an hour away or an hour away from Atlanta. So you're driving on a freeway. You have the chance to design a billboard for the side of the freeway. What does Dr. Wahab's billboard say to the world about what you believe?
It is probably the most important thing to be unstoppable. And that's it. Just be unstoppable. Be unstoppable in everything you do. Because if you buy into yourself being unstoppable in everything you do, when you hit those low points and you get those dark days, I've had them. I've been dark before. I've been sad before. I've been low before. In my childhood, in my middle age, in my adulthood, you name it, it's happened. But I have to pull myself back together and say, you know what? You're unstoppable. You have to believe that. And part of our biggest problem as Gen Xers, I think, and this is a generational thing, is, like you said, we were taught to grind. We were taught that, the early bird gets the worm. We were taught all of these things that, that are these adages of part of being unstoppable means that you are also unbreakable, but you're not. You can break. And that's the fallacy. You can break and still be unstoppable. Well, because I think I lived my first part of my life thinking that if you break, that changes everything. So that was that fake it till you make it thing. So you're not allowed to break. So it is absolutely true that we can break and still be unstoppable. That's
I think a perfect place to wrap today's conversation. I really appreciate your time. It's been inspiring learning about your journey, what you've overcome, how you've reinvented yourself many times. And I wish you all the best. We'll have to do this again sometime.
Love it. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I'm excited to tell you my story, and I really enjoyed our time.
Thank you for listening to the Superintendent's Hangout. You can follow me on Twitter at DVS1970. Please be sure to share this show with friends and family on social media and in the real world. Thank you to Brad Bacayal for editing and production assistance, and to Tina Royster for scheduling and logistics. Thanks for hanging out, and have a great day.